Welcome to the exciting and highly profitable world of telephone bill auditing. My name is Howard Shaw. I'm your instructor and hopefully your mentor. I've been a pioneer in this fabulous field for over 20 years. This clip will tell you a little bit about me.
Mr. Shaw is one of the 13 founders of the highly prestigious Society of Telecommunications Consultants. His telephone detective-like investigations have ferreted out mistakes which have saved companies and government agencies millions of dollars over the past 15 years. Mr. Shaw has been featured in several news articles in major metropolitan newspapers and was featured on television business programs with Bell telephone executives. He was also among 230 telecommunications experts throughout the world selected to be included in the University of Southern California's Telecommunications Outlook 1987. Mr. Shaw also was listed in Who's Who in the Southeast and is a retired lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserves. A native of Philadelphia, he holds a Master's of Science degree from New York University and a bachelor's from DePaul University of Indiana.
I have to tell you, for me, this business is still as exciting today as the first day when I started. My first fee was for over $10,000, and I received it just 2 days before Christmas. That was over 20 years ago. After the first refund, they came faster and easier. This clip will show you some of my favorite refunds. For a South Florida city, the check amounted to $38,938.12. This was for overbilling of lines and mileage. For another South Florida city, for equipment, was $5,545 overbill. For a lumber company in Broward County in 3 locations, the total was $25,926.55 in credits. For a large South Florida savings and loan, a check for $15,205.87 for equipment overbill, plus another $6,000. For a Miami Beach insurance company, $21,600 for a Centrex system. For a mortgage company in Miami, $21,578. The commission check you see is $10,789. And a long-distance overbill for a time-sharing hotel, $6,499.70 for a discount not given. Telephone bill auditing has been very good to me, and it can do the same for you. It's a highly profitable business you can work out of your home full-time or part-time. The key to being a good auditor is correct training, desire, and determination. I can only give you one, correct training. You must provide the determination and desire. First, I'd like to make it very clear that telephone auditing is not difficult, and with the right training, it can be easy to learn, so let's get started. Our first step should be to review the materials with which we will be working. Now keep in mind, the Institute is consistently upgrading and updating their educational materials. It's possible your materials are slightly different than the ones we have here today. If they are, it's because you have the latest version. We use the most up-to-date materials available anywhere at any price on my favorite subject, telephone bill auditing. Let's take a look at the table of contents. Take a moment and review them in detail. Okay, now that you're familiarized with the tools we will be working with, let's get started. There are 4 general profit centers in telephone auditing, and they are as follows. Profit Center 1, overcharges. Profit Center 2, future savings. Profit Center 3, long distance. Profit Center 4, hardware and maintenance. Now let's talk briefly about each one, and then we will begin studying them in great detail. Profit center number one, overcharges. Overcharges are hardcore refunds issued by the telephone company for errors and overcharges. These errors are found by the auditor and a refund is issued. These are without doubt the most exciting part of telephone auditing. Area of overcharges include FCC-approved charges, couplers interface devices, phantom lines, circuit mileage, phantom circuits, taxes, hunting charges, directory advertising, misprogrammed dialer. Profit Center 2, future savings. A future savings is a totally transparent change that the auditor makes to a business telephone bill in order to reduce their monthly expense. The key is to do it without compromising service. If a future savings change is truly transparent, then the customer should only be aware of the change when they see their telephone bill at the end of the month and notices it has been reduced, but without any compromise in service. Areas of future savings include traffic studies, speed dial, call forwarding, call conferencing, VGA voice grade amplification, wire maintenance, tips, erroneous services. Profit Center 3, long distance. Long distance is a business's link to the entire world. To many businesses, long distance service can be one of the single greatest expenses. It's a vital factor to the growth and prosperity of their business. In recent years, understanding the true cost of long distance has become more and more complex. There are almost an endless number of factors to take into consideration. What makes things even more complicated is that no two business long-distance calling patterns are the same. Part of your job as an auditor is to cut through all this and find your customer the best rate from the most reliable long-distance carrier. Areas of long-distance analysis include cost per minute, inter-ladder calls, intra-ladder calls, answer supervision, fixed recurring charges, reselling long distance. Profit Center 4, hardware and maintenance. It's not always the telephone company that overcharges. It's not only the company employee that picks the wrong overpriced service. Many times the overcharge comes from the client's vendor. A vendor is an independent person or company responsible for installing and fixing your client's telephones when they break down. After the deregulation of telephone companies, customers had the opportunity to buy their telephones or hardware from someone other than the telephone company. This gave birth to thousands of vendors who install and maintain telephone systems for a living. Many times your client will have a service agreement with their vendor. This service agreement is an area any good auditor needs to scrutinize. Areas of overcharges include equipment inventory, maintenance agreement. Your different profit centers in telephone auditing are as follows. Take a moment and review them one more time. Now, let's see how different profit centers come into play in an actual audit. Let's turn to page 123. This is a travel agency we audited. See if you can spot 3 of the 4 profit centers we just spoke about. All right, let's look at item 2. Item 2. In reviewing their bills, the auditor noticed that though new warranty telephone sets had been supplied, Bell was still billing for set maintenance. A refund was requested for all maintenance amounts over the 14-month period since the sets were installed. This is clearly Profit Center 4 hardware and maintenance. Let's look at item 3 now. Item 3. The auditor then determined that 12 of 30 Centrex lines had been ordered disconnected during November 1990, but the billing for them did not cease. Therefore, the auditor requested a 3-month refund for the 12 lines. This is Profit Center 1 overcharges. Let's look at item 4. Finally, a check of Centrex line features being billed revealed that station speed call was unnecessary. This is because the sets supplied by Bell have individual 24-number speed call memory. Also, since the system was designed so that all staff had all lines on each one of their sets, then it wouldn't make sense to program speed call through the Centrex lines, because there would be no guarantee that the line they had programmed a particular speed number to would be free when that number was needed. This is clearly Profit Center 2, future savings. The only area we were unable to help this customer on was Profit Center 3, long distance. At the time, they already had a very competitive rate. There are 2 items of general information that you need to know before getting started. Item 1 are the different telephone systems, and item 2, the different regional Bell operating companies. One of the first things you need to know are the different telephone systems that a potential customer could have. Let's familiarize you with the 4 different types of telephone systems. Turn to page 29. 1. Single line service or 2-line, used primarily for residences and small businesses, with a line that runs directly to the local telephone company. 2. Key system, which is typical of the standard office phones used by businesses with multiple lines and line selection buttons which permit access by pressing a button and either placing or receiving a call. Any line can be answered from any phone, and no switching is required since circuits connect directly to the local telephone company. Direct inward dialing, DID, is possible with this system. Again, these systems are found primarily in small businesses. 3. PBX, which stands for Private Branch Exchange. This system is owned by the customer, operated by a switchboard located on the company's premises, and requires an attendant person. It connects to the phone company by trunks called lines, which switch from PBX to the telephone company line. Generally, you must dial a separate digit like 9 to gain access to an outside line. Capabilities include DID, call forwarding, and rotary line access. Dial one number and rotary switches it to the next available line. 4. Centrex system. It's different from a PBX system in that the switching equipment is owned by and located at the telephone company. Generally, a company must have at least 5 lines to have a Centrex system, and it is normally found in much larger companies. Its features and capabilities are many and varied. The other item of general information to know is the different regional Bell operating companies. January 8, 1982 marks the historic day AT&T agreed to divest itself of their 22 telephone operating companies, thus ending their monopoly on the U.S. telephone system. This agreement, signed between AT&T and the Justice Department, formed the 7 regional Bell operating companies. Now, one more thing that is very important. Throughout this course, I will refer to the local telephone company as follows: Telco, LEC, which stands for Local Exchange Carrier, Bell, Phone Company, CO Central Office. Also, telephone lines can be referred to as line, trunk, talk path. These are common terms that are used interchangeably in the industry. Become familiar with them and use them. I've used them throughout the course to get you in the habit. If you want to sound like a knowledgeable professional in the industry, you need to sound like one. Now we're ready to start on your first audit. After you've found and signed up your first client, you should now have 3 items. Item 1 is a signed contract with your company name on top. Please see page 24. This is the contract where your client agrees to pay you for your services. Item 2 is an LOA, or a letter of authority. Please see page 25. The LOA is your authorization from your client to negotiate an audit on their behalf. Let's take a few moments and review this important document to familiarize yourself with it. Dear Auditor, this letter confirms our appointment of your firm as our telephone consultant to act in our behalf on all matters concerning our telecommunications facilities and systems with such companies as local exchange carriers, long-distance carriers, long-distance resellers, aggregators and carriers, AT&T Communications, specialized common carriers, providers, and maintainers. You are granted the right of access to information regarding our telephone billing and our telephone systems. You are authorized to request equipment and system moves, adds, deletions, and changes, equipment and pricing information on central office lines, long-distance lines, that is watts, FX, tie, and so on, equipment, call information, and any other information concerning our system and facilities you deem necessary. All contacts are to be with you and directed to your attention. This does not preclude our intervention. We understand that when our customer billing and service records are released to you, the entity releasing the information has no authority to control the future use or dissemination of this information. Therefore, we release those entitlees from any and all liability that may arise out of your possession and use of the information in our records. This written authorization, unless amended in writing, is effective from this date for a period of 24 months for all accounts paid for by our business. Sincerely. And it's signed by the company executive. Let me show you a shortcut so you can get a signed LOA on your customer stationery without having to use a typewriter. It's really quite simple. Have your LOA typed on a blank sheet of paper. By using your customer's copy machine and his stationery as copy paper, you can duplicate your LOA right onto his stationery without having to have it typed. Here, let me show you. You take the client's stationery, place it into the copy machine, lock it in place, and take your LOA and place it into the machine for reproduction onto the client's thing. Push your button to start it. And there you are. Your LOA is printed on the client's stationery, ready for his signature. The third item that you will need to perform an audit is the customer's latest set of telephone bills. Please note, businesses have two types of bills. One from the local telephone company, and the second bill is from the long-distance companies such as AT&T, Sprint, MCI, or AllNet. The bills we are interested in are the LEC or telco bills for local service. Later we'll analyze the long-distance bills, but for now we're concentrating on the LEC bills. If the customer's business has not changed dramatically in the last 36 months, their last month's bill will do just fine. On the other hand, if the business has changed dramatically, then you may need a set of bills for the last 36 months. Now, armed with your three items, you are prepared to begin your audit. Now, let's learn to read and decipher a telephone bill. This is a prototype of a Southern Bell bill. The current balance due is $528.78. Now let's learn how to read and decipher a local telephone bill. First, basic service. Most telephone companies invoice their customers in advance for basic recurring monthly charges. Recurring monthly charges are charges that are applicable every single month, whether a single call was placed or not. Although the date of this bill is April 16th, the rental charge for service runs from April 16th through May 15th. Number 2, service order, other charges and credits known as OC&C. Due to the fact that customers are billed for basic service in advance by most telephone companies, a reimbursement must be issued when service is interrupted or disconnected sometime during the billing period. Under this heading, telephone companies make appropriate adjustments. One-time charges for installation or credits for overbilling are also itemized under this heading. Number 3, directory advertising. Along with the basic monthly charge, customers traditionally are entitled to one listing in the white pages. If a customer would like to enhance this advertisement, for example, boldface heading, charges that apply will appear here. Number 4, local calls. Intra-lat calls.
are detailed in this section. Intra-ladder calls are those made within your customer's ladder calling area. Not all local telephone companies provide an itemization of each intra-ladder call. Some even charge you on a per-page basis. This itemization is called your Local Usage Detail, LUD list. Number 5, directory information. Calls to the directory information operator 411 or 1-555-1212 are frequently charged on a per-call basis. Free directory listing calls are offered by different telephone companies. Number 6, County Emergency Services Surcharge, 911. This is a tax aimed to finance emergency facilities in your customer's county. Politicians enjoy camouflaging taxes within an already complicated telephone bill. 6A, Federal Tax. This is a 3% federal excise tax imposed by the federal government. Certain non-profit organizations are exempt from this tax. 6B, State and Local Taxes. This tax deviates according to your location. Certain non-profit organizations are exempt from these taxes. Number 7 and 8, Basic Service. This is a simple breakdown of the monthly recurring charge which applies every month. The CSR you will obtain from the vendor marketing group in your client's area will be a complete breakdown of the basic service charge. You must verify the accuracy of this section. It's vital to your audit. Number 9, FCC line charge. This line charge, which was approved by the FCC, must be applied to every single line. We'll go more in depth on this item later in the course. Numbers 11 and 12, Other Charges and Credits, OC&C. This heading is used for non-everyday reimbursements which a customer may be entitled to. For example, change long-distance carriers. Number 13, this heading details where the telephone company actually lists requested advertisements. From this telephone bill, we can tell that the client's basic service consists of 3 separate items totaling $350.43. In order to audit this section of the bill, you must request a CSR, a customer service record, from your local telephone company.
Now that you know how to read a telephone bill, let's learn how to analyze a CSR. By using your LOA, you can request your client's CSR or customer service record from your telco. A CSR is a detailed computer listing of all the items and services your customer buys or leases from the telco. The CSR is easily obtained from your telephone company, specifically the vendor marketing group or the central operations group. The name varies depending on your part of the country. You can use the form on page 386. Take a moment and review it. The telephone company will not send out a CSR unless you specifically request it. It's available free of charge and takes about 2 weeks to receive. No auditor should or can afford to be without it. You can mail or fax your request. One reason why the CSR is only sent out on request is because few people, including most telephone company employees, cannot read it. The CSR is composed of USOC, Uniform Service Order Code, codes, which when translated to normal English signify services the customer is using, like touch tone, call forwarding, and flat rate business line. The definition of these codes can be obtained by 4 different methods. 1, call your phone company and ask the customer service rep. 2, get a USOC code book. 3, turn to page 392 of your workbook where we've listed the most common ones. And 4, consult your telecom dictionary. All right, this is a typical USOC code book. This is published by Bell South. Your telephone company will have something similar to it. Consists of hundreds of pages and hundreds of definitions of words, of codes that are translated into the services that you need. You could possibly obtain it from your telephone company. That requires a telephone follow-up. Turn to pages 392 through 397. Let's take a few moments and familiarize yourself with this unique billing language. We have purposely left plenty of space so you can write in other USOC codes not listed. Now let's begin to decipher a CSR. Example 1. This is what a POTS line CSR looks like. A POTS line, which signifies plain old telephone service, is an account with traditional basic service, what a residence or small business would have. NP3. This is a no revenue item. We're not concerned with items our customer doesn't have to pay for. The last activity date, which is the last time any changes were made to this item, was April 9, 1984, as displayed 4984. 1SB. This charge is for a flat rate business line. With this service, an unlimited number of calls can be placed for a flat fee, unlike with the message rate. Also, always when looking at this item, make sure to check for the PIC, Preferred Inter-Exchange Carrier code. All the lines should be picked to the same long-distance carrier. This client is picked with AT&T number 288. Every long-distance carrier has its own 3-digit code. This rate for the item was $29.10. Last activity date 3/24/86. Look on page 392 and find the definition of 1FB. WMR. This charge is for the optional inside wire maintenance plan. Later on in the course, we'll go into detail why this plan should be removed. The rate for this item is $1.50. Last activity date, 1/9/87. Its USOC is not in the code book, so write it down on page 393. TTB. This charge is for touch-tone service for a business line. Without this service, only an old rotary phone can be used when dialing. This rate for the item is $1. Last activity date 4/9/84. Find the USEC code on page 393. $9ZR. This is the FCC interstate access charge, which every line is charged for. Later on in the course, we will go further into detail on the charge. This rate for the item is $6. Last activity date 3/3/85. Find the USOC code on page 392. Page 2 of the CSR is a breakdown and summary of all the charges for this account. This is the amount that appears on the customer's bill under basic service. Now, not all CSRs are this simple. Example 2. This is a CSR from the New England Telephone Company for a customer with a large PBX system. It's only one page from a report consisting of hundreds of pages. Take a moment and look at it carefully. Now, using pages 392 to 397, identify the different USOC codes found in this CSR. TJB, touch-tone charge for a trunk. 9ZR, FCC, access charge. TFC, business trunk line. If you look carefully, you can notice that every trunk has two additional USOCs, an FCC charge and a touch-tone charge. Every trunk must have one FCC charge, and almost all business lines are touch-tone, not rotary. Touch-tone costs on New England $4.03 per month. If you look carefully at the TFCs under the description column, you will notice that they all have HML and TER terminal numbers assigned. HML 01, 02 is the code assigned to this particular hunt group of telephone numbers. The terminal TER 00XX number assigned tells you which trunk or line is of the hunt group. The third to last item, 1LB, this is an additional business line. As you can notice, it's less expensive than a trunk. That's because it can't be run through the PBX system, and only one person can use it. Cost is $38.42 as opposed to $57.63. What you're doing in an audit is comparing the customer's CSR to their monthly bill and then to their actual on-premise service or equipment. Any discrepancies could be a potential overcharge or refund. I know some of what I just said you may not fully understand yet. That's because you haven't completed the course. Once you're done with the course, all this will be as simple as answering your telephone. Now that you know how to read and decipher a telephone bill and CSR, we're ready to start looking for overcharges. FCC line charge. This charge was approved by the FCC to compensate the local telephone companies for loss of revenue from long-distance calling. In essence, an FCC charge is an additional charge for you to be connected to the long-distance network by the local telephone company. Turn to page 171. Whenever someone wants to make a long-distance call, that call is initially treated like a local call. This call goes directly to the phone company CO or central office. From there, that call is forwarded by the telephone company to the customer's long-distance company's POP or point of presence. From there, the call goes on the long-distance network. The important thing to remember is the number of FCC line charges should exactly equal the number of lines or trunks that you have listed on the CSR. Nearly every type of communication path, from a fax line to POTS, plain old telephone service line, must have an FCC charge. One of the few exceptions is a dedicated circuit. We'll talk about dedicated circuits in more detail later. For now, remember that a circuit is a talk path exclusively between 2 points that does not have access to the long-distance network. I could very easily say that more than 90% of the phone companies call FCC charges by the USOC 9ZR. Engrave this in your head. FCC charges are the same as 9ZRs. One of the first things you must do once you receive your client's CSR is to make sure that the total number of trunks lines must equal the total number of 9ZRs. This is one of the most essential observations in your audit. Let me show you a good example of this. This is a very large audit we conducted some time ago. For obvious reasons, I am only going to display 2 pages of this 200-page CSR. As you recall, CSR stands for Customer Service Record. As I was counting along, I kept in mind that my client had 80 trunks. In previous pages, I had counted 39 9ZRs. I continued counting 9ZRs. On this page of the CSR, I counted trunks 40 through 71. As I reached the last page of this lengthy CSR, I noticed at the very end there were 12 extra erroneous charges. As you can notice, these 12 extra charges generate $72 free for your phone company each month. To the far right of the 12 ZRs, you can see the last activity date of this item, 12/5/88. This means this error has been in place ever since at least this date. We were able to go back 3 years on this item and claim a refund totaling $2,592. That's $72 times 36 months is equal to $2,592. With our 24-month future savings contract, our client saved an additional $1,728 on their telecommunications expenses. $72 times 24 months is equal to $1,728. The total cost reduction breakdowns is as follows. Refund from LEC, $72 by 36 months is equal to $2,592. 24-month reduction, $72 times 24 months is equal to $1,728, which is a total of $4,320. On this item alone, our audit generated savings of $4,320, including future savings. $4,320 on this small, insignificant item on a CSR. Who would think that these few numbers and letters could equal so much money and that half of it is the fee? Not bad for a few minutes worth of work, especially when you realize that it could be as much as 20% tax included. Now, let's look at another example of excess 9ZRs. Pages 132 through 144 exhibit another example of FCC overcharges. Take a moment and familiarize yourself with it. As you can see, there are other overcharges included in this audit. Let's just concentrate on the 9ZR charges. As you can see on page 133, this customer was paying monthly for 108 9ZRs at $6 apiece. After several unsuccessful attempts to identify all 108 lines, we decided to obtain a switch dump from our client's PBX, an AT&T System 75. The switch dump is a printout from the client's PBX, which is on the client's premises. Tells us exactly how many lines are in service. This data is very valuable because it doesn't matter how many lines the LEC is billing for. If the PBX doesn't acknowledge them as being in service, then it's as if they didn't exist. But the customer still has to pay for them as if they were in use. The PBX and the CO switch must be synchronized. Pages 134 to 139 is a segment of the switch dump that our client's technician provided us. Because of its great length, it's not the entire switch dump. However, let's take a few moments to get familiar with what a switch dump looks like. As you look through the data, you can see some of the terminal numbers and telephone numbers programmed into the PBX. After the analysis was conducted, it was determined that our client only had 53 trunks and 108 FCC charges. It was clearly evident that our client was successively being overcharged for 55 FCC charges every month, totaling $330, as illustrated on page 140. After further research, we discovered the error was in effect since March of 1989. Credits appear on the customer's credit statement on pages 142 through 144. The total cost reduction breakdown is as follows. Refund from LEC, $330 times 17 months is equal to $5,610. 24-month reduction, $72 times 24 months, is equal to $7,920. The total savings of $13,530. Your fee is $6,765. This is another simple, non-technical reduction which had a high financial return. On this item alone, our audit generated savings of $13,530, including future savings. FCC overcharges are easy to find and very profitable. Look for them. They're out there. It's money waiting to be found. A coupler is a device, a piece of hardware, that was rented by the local exchange carriers to the customers. Couplers came into being in the 70s, when it first became legal to own your own telephone equipment, rather than to rent it from Bell. Everything from a simple key telephone system to an answering machine to a PBX had a coupler or interface device installed between it and the telephone lines connecting it to the public network. Their original stated purpose was to protect the public network from whatever harm customer-owned equipment could do to it. Bell never quite defined what that harm might be to the satisfaction of the FCC. To professional telecom people, the whole notion is fairly hilarious. Soon, the FCC started a program to register all CPE, that's customer-provided equipment, thus certifying that it could not harm the network. You may notice on your telephone equipment or hardware the notation FCC registration number or CPE followed by 14 letters and numbers, followed by R period E period, meaning ringer equivalent, and 3 more alphanumeric characters. This is proof that the equipment has been registered with the FCC. Virtually all CPE became FCC registered in 1979 or 1980, after which there was no excuse whatsoever for Bell to continue to charge for the couplers. Bell left them all in, of course, and continued charging the customer. When you find a coupler, or any other piece of equipment for that matter, billed to a client, Bell will always take the astounding position that the customer or in some cases they'll say the vendor, had the responsibility of requesting that it be removed. How many of your customers know what a coupler is? How many vendors would take such an initiative? Here are some important dates to remember. Couplers were not needed on PBX or key systems after 1180, assuming the manufacturer registered the switch with the FCC. Regarding answering machines, couplers were not needed after 7179 for all registered machines. These dates should be where you start to negotiate your client's refund. Bell will always show these devices as obsolete in their USOC codebooks. This will be their first clue that this little item is going to cost them money and make you money. This is a CSR of a major local hospital breaking down the equipment. We recovered $18,023.32 for obsolete couplers. Our check was for $9,011.66. Pages 84 to 101 shows another example of a coupler refund. It also lists in detail different documentation for proof on coupler claims. Since this refund was obtained, coupler refunds have become easier. There is also a request for a refund for an AT&T overcharge in this example. Let's concentrate on the coupler refund for now. Take a few moments and become acquainted with this audit. If you turn to pages 85 to 87, you'll see a CSR which details some couplers. As the handwritten notes point out, these devices can be very expensive and add up to a lot of money. Take a few moments to look at the page carefully. Page 88 is a simple claim on these devices. Please note the direct, effective writing style. Always be courteous, but direct to the point. Write in a simple-to-follow format. The last thing you want is a telco clerk telling you they don't understand your claim. Be direct and to the point. The key to this and any audit is to make your point clear and demanding. Here's the remaining chronology of the refund. Telephone company responded to the CDH coupler charges and acknowledged the overbilling. Additionally, they advised that AT&T must be notified separately regarding their charge, which was done. Telephone company made a site visit to confirm that the CDH coupler charges were not there and informed that the monthly charge of $61.60 would be removed. Further, they provided a credit for the overbilling, but also requested additional proof for the date of origin of the overbilling to substantiate the refund request. Telephone company provides agreed-upon credits while waiting for additional proof for further refund amount. The auditor sought a letter from the equipment vendor to substantiate charges that the overbilling originated in 1974, since the auditor's refund request covered 180 months. Telephone company acknowledges proof and offers an approximate refund. Negotiations follow to request the balance of the refund. Telephone company agrees to refund. Attaching page 165 in your book is always a good support. Phone carriers seem to get weak at the knees when they hear the word FCC. Page 165 is the FCC rules on couplers. Let's take a moment and read it. Phantom lines. Phantom lines are lines that are erroneously charged month after month. These lines, when called, lead to nowhere. I've even run into cases that businesses have been paying for lines that lead to a residence. This is a very profitable section of auditing. Many times phantom lines are erroneously charged for years, adding up to thousands of dollars in refunds and savings. Let's look at the 5 steps involved in a phantom line audit. Step 1. List all numbers on the CSR. If you're working directly off the CSR, you may wish to highlight them. The first thing that you must do is put together a list of all the numbers pertaining to your customer's account. This list can be obtained from the CSR. It's always a good idea to work directly off the CSR. If you copy the numbers onto another sheet of paper, you may make a mistake. It's also time-consuming, and time is a precious asset in a business. As you can see from this CSR, each trunk, TFC, has an assigned number. Go down each TFC and highlight the numbers. Step 2, call and verify all the numbers. Simply call the numbers and record what's at the other end. If you receive a high-pitched data type tone, simply write FM, meaning fax or modem. When you are answered by someone, introduce yourself. Mention the name of the person who signed the contract with your firm. It's important to identify yourself very clearly right away, because people sometimes feel uneasy about such calls. Step 3, if there are lines with no answer, try at a different time. If you receive no answer, make a note of the date and time next to the number, and try it again at several different times of the day. Try 3 to 4 times, marking down each attempt. Step 4, report your finding to management and ask for assistance. After you have tried each of the miscellaneous lines at your client's site several times and gotten no answer, the next step is to fax a request to your client contact person to try to ID them. Remember, a modem can be set on the send-only mode because that particular computer never receives inbound communications. When this is the case, there will be no answer on test calls. All other modems and all fax machines should return what's called the 1,000-cycle tone. That's a high-pitched squeal. Step 5. With approval of your customer, temporarily suspend the unidentified lines. The last resort when client cannot ID some lines is to suspend the mystery lines with the knowledge and consent of the client. The preferable way to do this is to have the client's telephone vendor suspend service by pulling the jumpers, that is, disconnecting wires at the demarc point at the RJ21X. This way, if someone complains his line is out of order, the tech can quickly restore it. If we suspend lines through the telco, then reconnecting, should it become necessary, is slower, typically a couple of business days. And of course, when a line is needed by the client to conduct business, the faster the restoral, the better. Never disconnect the line on the first try. Page 149 shows a refund check for a university we audited. This refund check of almost $8,000 was for strictly phantom lines. In a short period of time, you should be able to do the same. Phantom lines are out there. It's up to you to find them by carefully analyzing your CSR. It's easy to do. Just dedicate yourself to looking. Non-existent phantom circuits. The idea of phantom circuits is similar to that of phantom lines, which we've already reviewed. Phantom circuits are those circuits which clients are not aware they have or are paying for. Circuits are easy for the client to forget about. As you know, a circuit is a line that runs strictly between 2 points. And what makes them tricky is that they can't be identified over the phone by an auditor. Moreover, circuits don't have a telephone number to call. Its identification is usually alphanumeric. I've already covered the breakdown of a circuit and its different uses and costs. And now let's look at an example of a phantom circuit. Turn to page 431 in your book. I know the copy's terrible, but get used to it. The copies the telephone companies send out are not always the easiest to read. Perhaps that's the reason they make so many mistakes. This concerns a travel agency which used to rent Alamo rental cars for their customers. Over 2 years ago, their contract with Alamo expired, yet they were still paying for the circuit. Step 1 is identify the circuit location. It's 110 East Ballard Boulevard. Step 2, identify the foreign location. On page 432, the foreign location is 1401 South Federal Highway. Step 3, ask your client if they're aware of these circuits. The total refund on this particular account was over $8,000. Phantom circuits are out there. You need to find them. It's money waiting to be collected. Look for them. They're out there. Circuit mileage. A special service circuit is a dedicated line that runs between 2 premises and is never interrupted. The reasons for a circuit can vary tremendously. These are some examples. Private voice line, fire alarm dispatch, protective burglar line, data computer link. Data by far is the most common reason for having a circuit. Circuits can have a higher monthly fee compared with traditional service, but you can make unlimited calls at a flat rate no matter where the endpoint is. There are 2 types of circuits, analog and digital. Digital is a much more expensive circuit than analog. A digital circuit is for high-speed data transmission and can transmit data without the use of a modem. An analog circuit is a voice-grade circuit that operates at 300 to 3,000 hertz. An analog circuit can only transmit data with a modem. If your customer has a digital circuit, there's a strong possibility they really only need an analog circuit. This is your first step in auditing a circuit. If your customer has a digital circuit, always verify if he can use an analog instead. Many times, volume determines the need for a circuit. Circuits usually have 4 major components, 3 of which are used for billing purposes. The 4 components are 1. Circuit ID, 2. Mileage, 3. Loop charges, 4. Transmission and signaling charges. Components 2, 3, and 4 are the components used for billing. Therefore, we will pay special attention to these 3.
Number 1, circuit ID. Circuits have an alphanumerical means of identification known as circuit ID. They don't have a conventional 10-digit number like 305-284-8858. Circuits can be either in a telephone number format or what's called serial number format. The example you see demonstrates a serial number identification. This is a CSR for a security firm we obtained a substantial refund for. The USOC for circuit is CKL. It's listed on page 394. If you look at USOC CKL1 on this CSR, you can see an alphanumerical code. For example, 72 PLNA 411915, New York, NY, under the description column which identifies it. A circuit with a telephone number ID would look like any normal telephone number, and its area code, for example, 96DINA 305-284-8858-001, the only alteration it has is a couple of codes before and after the number which tell the phone carrier what kind of data is run through the circuit. This is referred to as a service code. The definition of the codes can only be obtained from the telephone company. Call them and ask. They are required to give you this information. Number 2, mileage. Mileage is a very probable area of overcharge. A client will pay a lower monthly fee for a circuit that's located next door as opposed to one 20 miles away. Distance charges are covered under mileage billing on the client's CSR. There are 2 components to mileage billing. 1, fixed minimum charge. Fixed minimum charge is a recurring monthly fee. In this example, it's $36.86. The second component is interoffice mileage. This is the charge for the air miles between the two telephone company COs, central offices, which service the two circuit locations. This distance between COs is measured in air miles, or as it's referred to in the industry as, quote, as the crow flies, unquote. In this example, in New York, any circuit that travels in excess of 12 miles is billed as follows. Fixed rate, $36.86. Variable rate is $12.67 per mile. Thus, the calculation for mileage is as follows. $36.86 plus $12.67 times 20 miles, or $290.26. Number 3, loop charge. CON2X is the USOC for the loop charge. Write it on page 392 of your book. The loop charge is $21.53 at each location. The loop charge covers the cost of the connection between each location and its local central office. The circuit will have 2 loop charges, one for each end. The loop charge is for connecting 1401 Franklin to its central office and 115 Broadway to its central office. There should be only 2 loop charges per circuit. Number 4, signaling and transmission. The last 2 components that determine the cost of a circuit is signaling and transmission. Signaling determines how one location tells the other location that it's transmitting data. For example, if at one location the phone is picked up, it will ring at the other location. Transmission packages are configured, designed, and priced by the telco based on the type of equipment being used by the client on the circuit. The USOC PMWV2 signifies this on the CSR with a cost of $7.07.
What is the largest area of overcharge in circuits? It's mileage. Telephone companies have a tendency of selecting the wrong central office when engineering a circuit. This in turn increases your client's mileage on the circuit. The telephone company is required to provide service through the closest CO. You can get a listing of your telephone company's COs directly from them. By using a local city map drawn to scale, it will take very little effort and creativity to verify the proximity of your client's closest CO. Circuit mileage is a refund area rarely looked at even by experienced auditors. Don't forget, like we said in the beginning of this section, if your client has a digital circuit, they may only need an analog circuit. The savings can be hundreds of dollars every month, and half of that can be yours. Let's review the steps in auditing a circuit for mileage. Step 1. If your customer has a digital circuit, verify he needs a digital and not a less expensive analog circuit. Step 2. Verify the number of loop charges and their cost. Step 3. Verify the number of signaling and transmission charges and their cost. And step 4, verify the air miles between the 2 COs. Taxes. A billing error that affects more companies than you may realize is the incorrect billing of taxes. This can be a tremendous profit center to any auditor. This error includes both the billing of state and local sales taxes and the billing of federal excise taxes. Federal tax is a tariff of 3% on telecommunication services. The key is knowing these little-known exemptions.
Exemptions to federal tax include the following: common carriers, nonprofit hospitals, nonprofit educational services, telephone and telegraph companies, radio and TV stations, schools operated as an activity of a church, parish, or other religious body, and governmental tax-exempt organizations.
In order to find out your federal exemption, call the IRS for publication 510. This publication will tell you which organizations and agencies may be exempt or partly exempt from federal taxes. It's free. It's very helpful. Call toll-free 1-800-829-1040. If this number is ever changed, please call us at the Institute and we'll give you the correct one. Exemptions for state and local taxes vary by state. Many of the federal exemptions also apply. In order to find out what your state exemptions are, request a free copy of your state tax guide. This is done by calling your State Department of Revenue. also known in some states as the Department of Equalization. This guide is a summary of all your state tax laws written in simple plain English. They're anywhere from 20 to 300 pages long. In order to find out what your municipal taxes are, call your municipality and request any information they have available. Apply for a refund for one of your nonprofit customers and put the burden of proof on the municipality. In other words, let them do the research showing you who is exempt from municipal taxes. If you turn to page 110, you'll find a certificate of tax exemption. This is usually all you need to provide to the phone carriers as proof. You can always get back federal taxes paid in error directly from the federal government by filing IRS Form 843. The IRS will refund taxes paid in error over the last 3 years. They require a log that details the telephone taxes paid or the actual bills just in case they would like to perform an audit. The phone carriers are only enforced to keep a copy of customers' bills for a certain amount of time. This varies throughout the country. But sometimes even this version of the bill that they keep is so summarized there isn't enough information for the IRS to perform its audit. Therefore, it's very important that your customers keep their bills because without them, we're working with our hands tied. Let's take a look at an example. Pages 102 to 122 has miscellaneous documentation used to obtain a refund for a client in the excess of $8,600. This customer was unknowingly paying for taxes every single month since 1976. We were able to go back 4 years on the local and 3 years on state and federal. I'm sure no one was disappointed when we were able to retain a refund of nearly $9,000. Take a moment, become familiar with the audit. Let's look at the audit in detail. Pages 103 to 105 are copies of AT&T, MCI, and Southern Bell bills. They all obtain overcharges. Even though they look like modest amounts, these amounts add up quickly. Page 106 shows a letter from the auditor to the carrier. It explicitly states the amount of taxes that they expect back and estimating the overpayment of taxes to be a certain amount. Page 107 is a letter to another carrier, in this case AT&T, requesting a refund of taxes for this nonprofit client. Page 108 is a grid showing each of the bills with the amount of taxes, federal, state, and local, so that the auditor can determine what to put into his letter. Pages 109 to 114 are documentation of the client's nonprofit status. I strongly urge you to take a moment to review them. Pages 115 to 118 is the reproduction of the official Florida statute and federal statute regarding credits and refunds. These are provided by the carrier, so study this carefully so that you know, and you'll know how to get it from your state. Page 119 contains a letter from the attorneys for a small municipality. It explains exactly who they are exempting from the city utility tax. It's a very tight thing. You generally won't find the municipalities returning money. Page 120 is the Southern Bell certificate to exempt your client from federal excise tax for communication services or facilities used by a school operated as an activity of a church or religious body. Pages 121 is a certificate that the carrier requires for exemption of federal excise tax on communication services for use by nonprofit educational institutions. Page 122 is a certificate of exemption from the utility from Florida sales tax on charges for telephone service by a nonprofit organization. It's where you discover the incorrect billing of taxes. Make sure you notify the telephone company to prevent future billing of taxes. Hunting. A hunting or rotary charge is a charge for a telephone call to jump to the next available line on a multi-line system. Let's see what happens in this example. Line 1 receives a call. Line 1 is busy. Another call comes in. The call is rotated to the next available line, which in this case is line 2. Now lines 1 and 2 are busy, and yet another call comes in, and it is rotated to line 3. In addition to the initial line charge, many phone carriers apply additional fees to each line in hunting. In Florida, for example, for each 2 lines that you want to rotate or hunt, you must pay for a third line. The cost of a flat rate business line, 1FB, in Florida is $29.10. Therefore, the cost of 2 lines rotating is $87.30. The cost of 6 lines rotating is 5 lines plus 6 is equal to 11 times $29.10, or $320.10. Let's take a look at an example of a rotary overcharge. Pages 70 to 80 demonstrates the documentation we used to claim errors on rotary overcharges. Take a moment and review this audit. Page 71 is a section of the bill which gives a simple breakdown of the monthly recurring charges. Phone carriers provide this breakdown about every 6 months. Obviously, this would also appear on your CSR. This clearly shows the overcharge, 10 hunting service charges, and only 6 lines. Page 72 is a summary of the overcharge. Page 74 is the claim letter sent to Southern Bell. Pages 78 and 79 show the credits issued to our client, which appeared on their bills. The note on page 71 claims the customer should only be charged for 6 hunting charges. The reason for this is that the last number in a hunt group hunts nowhere. Instead, the caller gets a busy. Some telephone systems have the ability to go back to line 1 and search again for a free line or trunk. Directory advertising. An area that definitely warrants the auditor scrutinizing is directory advertising, also known as Yellow Page advertising. The Yellow Pages is a directory of all businesses. It's published by the telephone company. All businesses are listed. A business, however, can increase their chances of being noticed by a customer by running an ad. Ads can vary from simple ones to very elaborate advertisements. The key is to make sure your customer is only paying for what was ordered and in the proper time frame. Let's take a look at some examples. Pages 64 to 69 is the documentation used in the claim for erroneous charges on directory advertising. Take a moment and review this audit. Page 65 shows the letter in which the auditor questioned the billing of directory advertising. In this particular letter, we asked for an explanation of 2 different billings on directory advertising. Page 66 shows the credit given for this particular thing and showing the source of the error, the reason for the questioning. Actually, it was from this billing that the letter was written. Page 67 and 68 contains the letter from the carrier explaining or answering the questions. First one says that the directory that was first asked about was incorrectly billed. They billed it a month early, and so the client received $1,146 credit. In the second case, this was a case of overbilling of $96.60 per month. In this case, the Yellow Page people apologized for it. They said it was a computer problem. Page 69 shows how the auditor billed for his services. In this case, you'll notice that 411, which is given in this particular area, 2 free calls for each trunk, was overbilled. And so the client got a credit of $387 for that. That explains the information in pages 65 to 69. Let's look at another example. Page 162 shows the checks received from the client for our services in finding erroneous Yellow Page advertising. As Section 1 shows, this customer is a law firm that had all its lawyers listed at one time. As time went by, lawyers came and went from the firm, but the listing remained the same year after year. When we compared the names of the lawyers actually in the firm to the ones listed, there were very many expensive discrepancies. Even though Yellow Page auditing is not the most profitable area of auditing, it's nonetheless an area where errors do happen, and errors in our business is money. Misprogrammed dialer. One of the least noticed areas of refunds are misprogrammed long-distance dialers. I know we have not covered long distance yet, but I don't think you'll have any trouble learning this simple but highly profitable refund technique. As you will recall from our previous explanation on ladders, you can make unlimited local calls without charge. The calls that are free are designated by the first three numbers of their telephone number. The USOC designated is NXX. It's on page 393. It's also referred to as an exchange. In many instances with the mergers, acquisitions of long-distance companies, the dialer which connects the client's line to the long-distance carrier is programmed incorrectly. The end result is a local call billed as a long-distance call. Let's take a look at an audit on pages 145 to 148. Take a moment and review. Due to several mergers by the long-distance carrier, the dialer which connects the client's lines to a long-distance carrier was never programmed properly, and therefore was charging long-distance rates for calls which should have gone through the local telephone company and consequently free. An analysis of the long-distance company billing to the client revealed erroneous charges that would have been free if dialed through the local telephone company as they should have been. Page 146 lists the local exchanges that are free calling areas for the client's exchange. These exchanges are in your Yellow Pages or can be obtained from your telco. Page 147 shows an analysis of the discount carrier's charges to those local exchanges. Because of the length of the bill month after month, the amounts of overcharge had to be estimated. I then requested a refund from the long-distance carrier for the overbilling dating back to April of 1988. Documentation from the previous original long-distance carrier was sent to verify the date of origin. Page 148 is the long-distance carrier crediting the entire amount back to April of 1988. This audit was a complete success.